The wooden cross marking Sarah's grave had begun to lean eastward, as if even in death she was trying to escape the relentless New Mexico wind. Ethan McCrae stood before it each morning, hat in hand, speaking words he no longer believed she could hear. 2 years had carved lines around his eyes that made him look a decade older. Not from age, but from the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from waking up alone in a bed built for two. I buried my heart with her. The thought arrived unbidden every dawn, precise as a razor. The ranch spread across 40 acres of red earth and scrub brush, bordered by rocky ridges that caught fire each sunset. He had built it with his own hands after leaving the Army in '74, every fence post a promise to Sarah that their life would be different from the violence he'd known. She died of fever in the winter of '76, 3 days before their 5th anniversary, and since then, the land itself seemed to withdraw from him. The crops grew slower, the well water tasted of rust. Even Storm, his 12-year-old gray gelding, had developed a strange restlessness, pacing the corral at night as if sensing something Ethan refused to acknowledge. The loneliness had weight. It pressed against his chest when he woke, sat across from him at meals, followed him through the fields like a second shadow. He tried to fill it with work, repairing sections of fence that didn't need repair, plowing furrows in soil too dry to plant, anything to collapse into bed each night, too exhausted to dream. But Storm was the thread, the last living thing that knew Sarah, that remembered her laugh when she'd feed him carrots from her apron pocket, that had carried her on their wedding day with wildflowers braided into his mane. The horse was 14 hands of muscle and memory, and as long as he stood in that stable, Ethan had a reason to open his eyes each morning. Which was why, on this night of June 14th, 1878, when the stable door slammed open with a violence that shook the cabin walls, Ethan's heart seized with a fear more primal than any he'd felt facing Confederate rifles at Antietam. He lunged from bed, feet hitting the plank floor before full consciousness arrived. Through the window, he saw Storm's pale shape vanishing into the darkness, galloping east toward the ridges with a speed that spoke of terror. Not wanderlust. No coyote could spook him like that. No snake. Something had sent 1,200 pounds of horse fleeing into the night as if pursued by the devil himself. Ethan grabbed his rifle from above the door and ran outside barefoot, the dry earth still holding the day's heat. The moon was a sliver, offering almost no light. He stood in the yard, chest heaving, listening to the fading drumbeat of hooves until silence swallowed everything except the wind and the mocking call of a distant owl. "Come back, boy. Don't leave me too." He spoke it aloud, not caring how pathetic he sounded alone in the darkness. The oil lamp he'd lit flickered in the cabin window behind him, the only point of light for miles in any direction. He sat on the front steps, rifle across his knees, and waited. Sleep was impossible. He'd lost too much already. He would not lose this. The night stretched. Stars wheeled overhead in their ancient pattern. Somewhere a coyote yipped and another answered. The temperature dropped 20 degrees between midnight and dawn, desert cold that made his fingers stiff around the rifle stock. He thought about Sarah, about the morning she'd brought Storm home as a yearling, eyes bright with surprise at her own daring. "You said we needed a good horse," she'd announced, "and this one followed me home from town like he already knew us." How could he explain to a ghost that he'd failed to keep anything alive in her absence? The horizon began to pale. Someone had hunted this woman like an animal. Someone had hurt her in ways that made Ethan's stomach turn. He lowered the rifle and stepped forward, moving slowly as he would toward a wounded deer. Storm nickered softly as if in approval. When Ethan reached up to touch her arm, to help her down, to offer the only kindness he knew, her skin burned with fever and exhaustion and terror. She was heavier than he'd expected when she half fell into his arms. Not fat, nothing close to fat, but dense with muscle and bone, and the weight of whatever horrors had driven her to his door. She smelled of sage and sweat and something sharper, the metallic tang of old blood. Her breath came in shallow gasps against his shoulder. "You can stay for now." He didn't know why those words came or what made him certain they were true. The woman's eyes, already half closed with exhaustion, flickered with something that might have been hope or might have been the last reflex before unconsciousness. When they landed on Ethan, sitting motionless in his chair 10 feet away, she flinched so hard the bed frame creaked. He raised both hands slowly, palms out. The rifle leaned against the wall behind him, deliberately out of reach. You're safe here. No one will hurt you. She watched him the way a trapped animal watches a predator, calculating distances, probabilities, escape routes. Her right hand moved beneath the blanket he'd covered her with, emerging with a small obsidian blade, primitive but viciously sharp. She held it steady despite the tremor in her arm. Ethan didn't move. He'd seen enough wounded soldiers know that fear made people dangerous in ways that anger never could. I'm Ethan. This is my home. You came on my horse, Storm. You were hurt. I brought you inside. She processed each sentence carefully, eyes never leaving his face. Minutes passed. The blade didn't lower, but her breathing slowed slightly. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been at dawn, but still rough with pain. Kiona. She touched her chest with her free hand, then pointed the blade at him in question. Ethan, he repeated. Ethan McCrae. She tested the syllables silently, lips moving. Then, how long? Since you arrived? Since dawn. You've been asleep maybe 6 hours. Her eyes widened slightly, and he saw a calculation again. 6 hours meant whoever chased her had 6 more hours to close the distance. She threw the blanket aside and tried to stand, but her legs betrayed her immediately. She caught herself on the bed frame, jaw clenched against what must have been tremendous pain. Ethan stood slowly, making no move toward her. You're in no condition to run, and even if you were, there's nothing but desert for 20 miles in any direction. No water, no shelter. You'd be dead by nightfall. Kiona's knuckles whitened around the obsidian blade. Better dead than taken back. Ayesha watched his hands move through the familiar ritual. You were soldier. It wasn't a question. Long time ago. Different life. You kill men. Her directness would have startled most people, but Ethan appreciated it. Yes, in the war. Confederates mostly. Some others after. She nodded as if this confirmed something she'd suspected. You have killer eyes. Soft now, but I see them. He'd never thought of his eyes as soft or hard, just tired. But she was right in a way. He'd seen death up close, had delivered it with precision and detachment, and that left marks invisible to most people. What about you? He asked. Have you killed? Kiona's gaze moved to the horizon. One man, the one who owned me before I run. He tried to stop me. I fight. He fall, hit head on rock. I do not know if dead or just hurt. I run before I find out. Her voice carried no regret, only statement of fact. Ethan understood that too. Survival didn't allow for ethical hand-wringing. The men chasing you. Dull knife is dangerous knife. Get you killed. Ethan knelt beside her, watching her hands move with the efficiency of someone who'd learned blade maintenance before learning to read. The morning light caught the obsidian knife tucked into the leather cord at her waist, and he wondered how many times that small weapon had meant the difference between freedom and captivity. My father taught me. He said a warrior who does not care for weapons does not deserve them. Past tense. Ethan heard the weight of loss in those words but didn't press. Instead, he stood and moved to the stove, building up the fire, measuring out coffee grounds into the battered tin pot. The domesticity of it felt strange after 2 years of mechanical routine. Having someone to make coffee for changed the entire equation. When he brought her a cup, she took it with both hands, inhaling the steam like it was something precious. Her eyes closed briefly, and he saw her shoulders drop a fraction, some tension releasing. Thank you. The words came softer than anything she'd said before, and Ethan realized this might be the first moment since her arrival that she wasn't actively cataloging escape routes or threats. He sat across from her, his own cup warming his palms against the desert morning chill. I need to ride into town today. Get supplies, check if anyone's asking questions. You'll be safe here if you stay inside, keep the rifle close. Kiona's eyes snapped open, the momentary peace evaporating. No, I go with you. Too dangerous. If the men tracking you have Confederates, if anyone recognizes you, I hide in barn, in shadow, and wagon bed if needed, but I do not stay alone. Not anymore. The finality in her voice told him this wasn't negotiable. He studied her face, seeing past the bruises that had begun to yellow at the edges, past the fierce set of her jaw, to the underlying truth. She'd spent too long being isolated and vulnerable. Being left alone felt like abandonment, even if he meant it as protection. All right, but you stay in the wagon, under the canvas. Don't show yourself unless I say it's safe. She nodded once, decisive, and returned to sharpening his knife. The ride to town took 2 hours, with Storm pulling the wagon at an easy pace that didn't tax his still recovering strength. Ayasha lay hidden beneath old burlap sacks and a stretched canvas tarp, completely invisible to anyone who didn't know to look. Ethan felt her presence like a held breath, aware of every bump that might jostle her, every passerby whose eyes lingered too long on his wagon. Slavers? Douglas leaned in, lowering his voice like he was sharing gossip rather than discussing human trafficking. 3, 4 men been through here twice in the past week, looking for an escaped Apache girl. Big one, they said, tall and built like a damn ox, offering $50 for information leading to her capture. $50 was 6 months' wages for some men. Ethan kept his face neutral, reaching for the flour sack like the conversation meant nothing to him. That's a lot of money for one escaped slave. Douglas shrugged. Leader's got a scar running down his face. Mean-looking son of a bitch. Said she's dangerous, killed a man before she ran. Said she might be armed, might try to seduce some lonely rancher into hiding her. The casual misogyny in that last statement made Ethan's jaw tighten, but he forced his voice to stay level. They say which direction they were headed? North, last I heard. But they'll be back. Men like that don't give up when there's money involved. He heard her exhale, long and controlled, followed by the slight shift of her repositioning beneath the covering. The sun climbed higher, turning the landscape into wavering sheets of heat. Ethan's mind worked through the implications of what Douglas had shared. $50, a murdered man, the scarred leader. Each detail painted Kiona's situation as more desperate than she'd revealed. They were an hour from town when she finally spoke from beneath the canvas, her voice muffled but clear. You hear them talk about me, yes. You hear the price on my head, yes. And you still bring me back to your home. Where else would I bring you? Silence stretched for a quarter mile. Then, most men would take the $50. I'm not most men. No, her voice carried something that might have been wonder or might have been grief. You are not. Back at the ranch, Ayasha emerged from beneath the canvas like a soldier leaving a foxhole, every movement cautious and controlled. She helped unload supplies without being asked, her strength evident in the way she hefted flour sacks that would have required 2 trips for most women. Ethan watched her work, noting how she moved with more confidence now, the stiffness of injury giving way to natural athleticism. That afternoon, he showed her how to sort seed corn, separating the viable kernels from those too damaged or immature to plant. She picked up the technique within minutes, her large hands surprisingly deft. As they worked side by side at the table, Ethan found himself acutely aware of her presence. The way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, the small scar above her eyebrow, the sheer physical reality of her taking up space in his world. In Apache territory, women plant, harvest, prepare food. Men hunt, fight, protect. But all must know all tasks. Otherwise, if men die, how do women survive? That's smarter than how we do it. And now, what you see when you look at me. The question hung between them, weighted with more than curiosity. Ethan chose his words carefully. I see someone who survived things that would have broken most people. Someone stronger than anyone I've ever met, but also someone who shouldn't have to be that strong. I see Kiona. Her expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering behind the warrior's mask. No one say my name like that, like I am person, not problem. You are a person. Everything else is just circumstances. She turned away, but not before he saw her blink rapidly against tears she wouldn't let fall. When she spoke again, her voice carried the rough edge of suppressed emotion. There is more you should know about why they hunt me so hard. Ethan waited, sensing the weight of whatever confession was coming. The man I kill, maybe kill, his name was Elias Rourke, leader of the men who chased me. But that is not worst part. She was the only witness to a murder, and the murderer had a perfect scapegoat in her. That's why the price is so high. Not because you ran, but because you know. Ayasha nodded miserably. If I go to law, I am Apache woman. They hang me for murder before Silas even get trial. If I stay quiet, Silas hunt me forever, because as long as I breathe, I am threat to him. Either way, I am dead. No. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. Ayesha looked up, startled. You're not dead. You're here, you're alive, and I won't let them take you. Not Silas, not the law, not anyone. You cannot promise that. You are one man with a ranch 40 miles from anywhere, who knows every canyon and ridge within a 3-day ride, who learned to shoot under fire and hasn't forgotten how. He crossed to her, placed his hands on her shoulders, feeling the tension coiled in every muscle. Kiona, I lost everyone I cared about before you arrived. Sarah to fever, my parents to age, my army brothers to lead in bad luck. I've been empty for 2 years. Then Storm brought you here, half dead and still fighting, and something in me woke up. I'm not letting that go. I'm not letting you go. Her eyes searched his face with an intensity that felt like being seen through. Whatever she found there made her shoulders drop slightly, the warrior's constant vigilance easing by a fraction. This will bring you trouble, maybe death. I know. This will make you criminal, hiding me, aiding murder witness. Technically, I'm aiding the witness to a murder, not the murderer. There's a difference, Wickham. The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips, there and gone like desert rain. You make joke when situation is serious. Learned it in the war. When things get bad enough, you either laugh or scream. Laughing's more useful. She lifted one hand to his face, her palm rough with calluses, and rested it against his cheek. The gesture was achingly tender coming from someone so physically powerful. Ethan McCrae, you are either bravest man I know or biggest fool. Can I be both? This time her smile lasted longer, transforming her face from stern warrior to something younger, almost playful. Yes, both. That night, Ethan sat at his table writing a letter to Marcus Webb, his former Army companion who now ran Border Patrol out of Lincoln County. The letter was careful, coded in the way old soldiers developed, asking if Marcus had heard anything about a murdered merchant in Santa Fe, about a slaver named Elias Rourke, about how a man might protect someone the law would condemn without hearing their story. He sealed it and set it aside to post next time he risked a trip to town. Across the cabin, Ayesha had fallen asleep sitting up, her back against the wall, one hand still resting on the obsidian blade at her waist. Even in sleep, she was ready for violence, unable to fully surrender to vulnerability. Ethan stood and draped a blanket over her shoulders, moving carefully to avoid waking her. As he did, she murmured something in Apache, a word he didn't know, and her hand caught his wrist with surprising gentleness. Stay. Her eyes were still closed, the request emerging from some half-dreaming state. He sat beside her, his back to the same wall, their shoulders touching. She shifted slightly, her head coming to rest against him, and within moments her breathing deepened back into sleep. He sat there as the fire burned down to embers, as the night sounds of the desert filtered through the cabin walls, as his own exhaustion pulled at him. This woman, dangerous, haunted, stronger than anyone he'd known, had asked him to stay. And for the first time since Sarah died, staying felt like more than just enduring. The next morning brought Marcus Webb. Ethan woke to the sound of hoofbeats, his soldier's reflexes pulling him to full alertness before his eyes focused. Ayesha was already up, rifle in hand, positioned by the window. Through the gap in the curtain, Ethan saw a single rider approaching, dressed in the distinctive dust-colored uniform of the Territorial Patrol, a captain's insignia visible on his shoulder. Marcus, he said, relief and wariness mixing in equal measure. It's all right, he's a friend. How you know? Kiona's voice was sharp with suspicion. Friend betray faster than enemy, because you do not watch them as close. Fair point. But I served with Marcus for 3 years. He pulled me out of a Confederate prison camp. I trust him with my life. The question is, does he trust you with mine? Before Ethan could answer, Marcus had dismounted and called out, Ethan McCrae, you going to make me stand in this sun all day or offer a man some water? Ethan stepped outside, acutely aware of Ayesha tracking his movement through the window, rifle trained on Marcus's back. His old friend looked older than when they'd last met 6 months ago. More gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes. The weariness that came from enforcing law in a territory where law was more suggestion than structure. Marcus, wasn't expecting you. Got your letter? Wrote out soon as I could. That was fast. I only sent it yesterday. Marcus's eyes sharpened. I didn't get any letter, Ethan. I came because 3 men asked me yesterday if I knew anything about a hermit rancher named McCrae living out past the ridge. Said they were tracking dangerous property, and they had reason to believe said property might have found its way to your door. The carefully chosen words, property instead of person, told Ethan exactly what kind of men they were and what they thought of Kiona. What did you tell them? That I knew Ethan McCrae as an honest man who kept to himself and didn't involve himself in other people's business. Also told them I'd been out this way 2 days ago and saw nothing unusual. That was a lie, though. You haven't been here in months, Marcus smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Territorial patrols got a lot of ground to cover. Easy to lose track of where you've been and when. Why would you lie for me when you don't even know what this is about? Because I know you, and I know the kind of men who call human beings property. That's reason enough. The cabin door opened, and Ayesha stepped out, rifle still in her hands but lowered to a less immediately threatening position. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, taking in her height, her build, the way she moved with controlled power. I'll be damned. The stories weren't exaggerating. Kiona's eyes narrowed. What stories? Marcus held up both hands in a placating gesture. Just what the slavers said, that they were tracking a tall Apache woman, exceptionally strong, who'd killed a man and run. They didn't mention she'd be quite so formidable, Ethan supplied. I was going to say magnificent, but formidable works too. Kiona's expression didn't soften. You with patrol, you uphold law. Law say I am escaped slave, maybe murderer. Why you not arrest me? Marcus looked at her directly, his tone shifting from casual to serious. Because the law also says I'm supposed to hear both sides of a story before making judgments. And because, in my experience, the men who deal in human flesh aren't generally truthful about much else either. So why don't you tell me your side, and we'll see where we stand? Ayesha glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragement. She took a breath and began speaking, her English still accented but clear, laying out the same story she'd told Ethan, her capture, her time with Cordell, the murder she'd witnessed, Elias Rourke's threat. Marcus listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he spoke. James Cordell's death was reported 3 months ago, found in his office with his throat cut. Local sheriff ruled it a robbery gone wrong, never arrested anyone. But I heard rumors, whispers that maybe it wasn't robbery at all, that maybe one of his business partners wanted him gone. Elias Rourke, his partner, was. Cordell handled the legitimate trade goods. Kane handled the less legitimate merchandise. Profitable arrangement until it wasn't. So there is proof? Someone beside me who thinks Silas guilty? Marcus shook his head slowly. Not proof, just rumors. Nothing that would stand up in court against a white man's word, especially with you as the only witness. A good lawyer would have you convicted before you opened your mouth. Then what I do? Kiona's frustration bled through every word. I cannot run forever. I cannot go to law. I am trapped. Not necessarily, Marcus said. But Ethan, you need to understand what you're signing up for. Harboring an escaped slave is illegal. Interfering with legal recapture is criminal. If this goes badly, you could lose everything. Already lost everything that mattered. This is what I'm choosing to save. Ayesha looked between the 2 men, her expression caught between gratitude and guilt. I bring this to you. Both of you, this is not your fight, like hell it isn't, Marcus said. I became a lawman because I believed in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. That badge doesn't mean much if I let injustice happen because it's inconvenient. He turned to Ethan. I can give you 3, maybe 4 days before Kane's men get organized enough to search this far out. Use that time to prepare. Fortify what you can, cache supplies, make sure you've got escape routes if it comes to that. We'll need weapons, ammunition. I'll send what I can through Douglas at the general store. Tell him it's for coyote hunting. He'll understand. After Marcus left, riding back toward town with a final warning to stay alert, Ethan and Ayesha stood in the yard, the weight of their situation settling over them like the afternoon heat. He risked career for me, Ayasha said softly. For stranger. Not a stranger anymore. She turned to face him fully, and in the harsh sunlight he could see every scar, every mark of survival on her skin, and found her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness and everything to do with the fierce life burning behind her eyes. Ethan, if they come, when they come, when they come and things go bad, you must promise me something. He waited. You do not die for me. You are good man, rare man. World need men like you more than it need one broken Apache woman. You're not broken, and I'm making no promises about dying or not dying. I'm only promising that I'll fight like hell to keep us both alive. Why the question again, but different this time. Softer. They stood facing each other in the red dust. Two broken people discovering that maybe broken things could still fit together, could still create something whole. That night he found the second sign. It was carved into the wooden beam of the stable, low enough that you'd only see it if you were crouching to check Storm's hooves. A simple drawing, a bird with three tail feathers, one broken. Aisha knelt before it, one hand reaching out to trace the lines, and when she looked up at Ethan, tears streamed freely down her face. Dakota alive. This is his mark. When we were children, I fall from tree, break my arm. He draw this bird, say I am like bird with broken wing, but birds heal and fly again. So your brother's out there, watching, protecting, or trying to. Why doesn't he come forward? Same reason I hide. Apache man approach White Rancher's property, he gets shot before he explain. Dakota is careful. He wait until he know I am safe, that you not hurt me. As they worked, Ethan found himself studying her, the concentration that made her bite her lower lip, the unconscious grace of her movements, the way late afternoon light caught the sheen of sweat on her shoulders. She'd tied her long dark hair back with a strip of leather, exposing the strong column of her neck, and he had to actively redirect his attention to the task at hand. You stare at me, it wasn't a question. Ethan felt heat climb his neck. Sorry, I was just thinking. About how lucky I am that Storm found you. Ayasha set down the rifle she'd been cleaning and crossed to him, moving with that characteristic blend of power and precision. She stood close enough that he could see the flecks of amber in her dark eyes, could smell the sauvage and sunlight scent of her skin. Luck is a strange word, feel more like fate. I don't believe in fate. No? Then what you call it, when dying man find will to live again? When hunted woman find protector? When two people who should be strangers become... She paused, searching for the right word. Ethan supplied it quietly. Family. Her hand came up to cup his cheek, her calloused palm warm against his skin. Yes, family. And there, in the fading light of a New Mexico evening, surrounded by weapons in preparation for violence, they stood together in a moment of peace, so profound it felt like prayer. The week that followed Marcus's visit settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. If normal could include fortifying of a homestead against armed slavers, while falling in love with a woman who could break a man's arm with her bare hands. Ethan woke each morning to find Aisha already outside, moving through a series of exercises that looked like combat and meditation woven into one fluid practice. Having someone who doesn't need protecting, who can stand beside me as an equal or better, that's not threatening. It's the first time in years I haven't felt completely alone. She studied his face, searching for dishonesty, and whatever she found made her shoulders relax slightly. Many men fear a strong woman, try to break her, make her small and weak so they feel big. Those men are fools. Your strength is part of what makes you who you are. I wouldn't change it even if I could. Kiona's hand found his, her fingers threading through his in a gesture that was becoming familiar. They sat like that as the heat pressed down around them, two people discovering that companionship didn't require words when presence said everything necessary. 3 days later, they rode into town together. It was risky, Ethan knew, but necessary. Supplies were running low, and hiding indefinitely would eventually draw more suspicion than a brief appearance. She's a ranch hand. Now, if you'll excuse us, a ranch hand. The gap-toothed man laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. That what they're calling it now? Seems like you got yourself a real fine piece of Apache tail there. She break you in half when you... Ethan's fist caught him in the mouth before the sentence finished, a straight right cross that sent the man stumbling backward into a water trough. The taller one's hand dropped to his gun, but before he could draw, Keona's arm shot out, her hand clamping around his wrist with enough force that Ethan heard bones creak. "Touch that gun, you lose hand." Her voice was flat, emotionless, and somehow more terrifying for its lack of anger. The man's face went white, and he nodded frantically. She released him, and he stumbled backward, cradling his wrist. The gap-toothed man climbed out of the trough, sputtering and furious, but Douglas had appeared in the doorway of his store with a shotgun cradled in his arms. "I think you boys have had enough excitement for one day. Why don't you move along before the captain hears there's been a disturbance?" The threat of Marcus's involvement was enough. The two men retreated, throwing venomous looks over their shoulders, but wise enough not to press their luck. Ethan turned to Douglas, who nodded toward the loaded wagon. "Best get moving. And McCrae, you might want to keep your ranch hand out of town for a while. People are asking questions, and not all of them are friendly." "Understood. Thanks, Douglas." They left Lincoln with Ethan's knuckles throbbing and Ayesha radiating a silent fury that made the air around her seem to vibrate. They were a mile out of town before she finally spoke. "This is what you risk. People see you with me. They think you are Indian lover. Squaw man. They lose respect. I don't give a damn about their respect. Those men were drunk idiots with nothing better to do than harass people they consider beneath them. But they are right, in a way. You have Apache woman in your home. You defend her. I care about you," Ethan interrupted. "That's what makes them angry. Not that you're Apache, but that I see you as fully human and they don't. Their small-mindedness isn't my problem." Ayesha was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You hit him very fast. Good punch." Despite everything, Ethan felt himself smile. Learned that in the Army too. Sometimes the best way to end a fight is to start it. This is true. But now those men will talk. They will say Ethan McCrae has Apache woman. Say maybe I am the one Silas Hunt. Word will spread. Let it spread. If it brings Silas here sooner, then we deal with him sooner. I'm tired of waiting. The third sign appeared that night. Ethan discovered it when he went to check on Storm before bed. She smiled, and it transformed her face with such sudden beauty that Ethan's breath caught. "Then you are miracle worker, Ethan McCrae." The 2 days before the meeting crawled by with agonizing slowness. They continued the combat training, with Ayesha teaching Ethan how to fight multiple opponents, how to protect his back against a wall, how to use improvised weapons when guns were empty and knives were lost. She was a merciless teacher, pushing him past exhaustion, correcting his form with strikes that left bruises. But the evening softened everything. They would sit outside as the sun set, watching the desert transform through shades of gold and crimson, and talk about everything except the violence that surrounded them. Ayesha told him about her childhood, about learning to hunt with her father, about the summer when she and Dakota had tracked a mountain lion for 3 days just to prove they could. "Father was so angry when we come home." Ethan felt his heart beating faster, felt the warmth of her body against his side, felt the terrifying and exhilarating pull of connection that he'd thought died with Sarah. "Keona, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with Silas, with the law, with anything else, I'm with you. Not because I pity you or because I need someone to fill an empty space, but because you've made me want to live again instead of just survive. Because every day with you feels like discovering something I didn't know I'd lost." Her hand came up to his face, tracing the line of his jaw with her thumb. "I am afraid, and Amy," she admitted quietly, "afraid to trust this. Every time I trust, I lose. Father, mother, freedom, safety, all taken. What if I let myself feel this, let myself love you, and then you are taken too? I can't promise nothing will happen to me. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that whatever time we have, I'll spend it showing you that some things are worth the risk." I need him to see sister he remember. Not broken thing trying to become something else. You could never be broken. And you're not trying to become something else. You're becoming more fully yourself. She touched his face gently. "You see me more clearly than anyone ever has. This is dangerous gift you give me." "Dangerous how?" because now I know what it feels like to be truly seen. If I lose you, the loneliness will be worse than before. Then we'll make sure you don't lose it. The ride to the canyon took 3 hours, following trails so faint Ethan would have missed them if Ayasha hadn't been guiding. They moved through terrain that grew progressively rougher, rocky passages where Storm had to pick his way carefully, dry washes that showed evidence of flash floods, and finally into a series of rising walls that narrowed into a slot canyon. "This is far as you go," Ayasha said, sliding off Storm. "Canyon opens into circle ahead, with spring at center. I walk from here." Ethan dismounted and checked his rifle one more time, though he knew it was pointless anxiety. If something went wrong in that canyon, he'd never get there in time to help. "How long should I wait? If I'm not back by sundown, assume I am not coming back." "Don't say that, is truth. We must be honest about dangers." She started to turn away, but Ethan caught her hand. "Kiona, wait." She looked back, and he saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling the solid strength of her body against his. "Come back to me, please." Her arms came around him, and for a moment they stood like that, two people holding each other against the weight of uncertainty. Then she pulled back, her hand cupping his cheek. "If spirits are kind, I will. If not—" She paused, then continued with fierce intensity. "If not, you remember that you give me gift of being seen, being valued, being loved. That is more than many people have in whole lifetime. I am grateful, whatever happened." Before he could respond, she kissed him. It was brief, just a press of lips that tasted of salt and promise, but it carried the weight of every unspoken feeling between them. Then she turned and walked into the canyon, her footsteps sure and steady until the red stone walls swallowed her from view. Ethan found a position in the rocks where he could watch the canyon entrance while remaining hidden. He settled in to wait, rifle across his lap, and tried not to imagine everything that could go wrong. An hour passed, then two. The sun climbed higher, turning the rocks into radiating ovens. Ethan's water was half gone, and he forced himself to ration the rest. Somewhere a hawk cried out, the sound echoing off the canyon walls in a way that made it impossible to determine direction. Then, distantly, he heard voices. Two of them, speaking in Apache, the words meaningless to him, but the tones clear. One deep and male, one Kiona's distinctive alto. They were talking rapidly, urgently, with occasional pauses that might have been emotion or emphasis. The conversation went on for another 30 minutes. Then silence fell, stretching so long that Ethan began to worry. His hand tightened on the rifle, every muscle tensed to move. Finally, movement at the canyon mouth. Ayesha emerged, and she wasn't alone. The man beside her was tall, though not quite as tall as Kiona, built with the lean, corded muscle of someone who lived by hunting and survival. His face bore the same strong bone structure as his sister's, the same deep-set eyes, though where Kiona's were warmer in their darkness, his were hard as obsidian. He carried a rifle of his own, older but well-maintained, and moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Dakota stopped when he saw Ethan, his body coiling with readiness despite his sister's presence. The two men studied each other across 30 feet of desert floor, each taking the measure of the other. Ayesha spoke in English, her voice carrying clearly. "Dakota, this is Ethan McCrae. He saved my life. Protect me. Treat me with honor." "Ethan, this is my brother Dakota. He has agreed to help us." Dakota's expression didn't soften, but he lowered his rifle slightly and spoke in heavily accented English. "Sisters say you are a good man. I watch you for days. See how you treat her, how she smile when you're not looking, how you stand between her and danger. These things speak truth." He crossed the distance and extended his hand. Ethan stood and grasped it, feeling the controlled strength in Dakota's grip. "Thank you for trusting me. I trust my sister. If she trusts you, I accept this." "But no," Dakota's eyes went flat and cold. "If you ever hurt her, I kill you slow. Understood?" "Understood." Dakota's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. "Good. Now we talk about men who hunt Kiona and how we kill them before they kill her." They rode back to the ranch together, Dakota's horse appearing as if summoned from the rocks where he'd kept it hidden. On the way, Kiona's brother shared what he knew. "I track Elias Rourke for 3 months. since I find sign that Ayash is still alive, still running from him. He is smart, careful, always has men around him, but he grows frustrated. He want Ayasha dead now, not just captured. She is witness to his crime, and every day she lives, he has fear. How many men does he have? Dakota held up both hands, extending all fingers. Maybe more now. He hire new ones in every town, offer good money for Apache slave, better money for Apache slave who cannot testify. We have captain of border patrol on our side. Marcus Webb, he's building a case. Law is slow, Dakota said flatly. Silas is fast. He will attack before law can help. When? Dakota looked at the sky, reading something in the angle of the sun or the quality of the light. Soon. 3-4 days. He is gathering men now. When the planning was done and night had fully fallen, Dakota prepared to leave. He would scout Silas's camp, try to determine exact timing, then return with advance warning. Before he mounted his horse, he pulled Ayesha aside. Ethan watched them speak in Apache, saw the way Dakota's hand rested on his sister's shoulder, saw her nod seriously at whatever he was saying. Then Dakota turned to Ethan. My sister has not smiled like this since before our parents died. You have given her something precious. For this, you have my gratitude and my respect. Fight well, white man. Keep her safe. I will. Or I'll die trying. Let us hope it does not come to that. The world has enough ghosts already. Dakota melted into the darkness, and within moments, it was as if he'd never been there at all. Ethan and Ayesha stood alone in the yard, the night pressing close around them, the weight of coming violence heavy in the air. Come inside, Ethan said quietly. He took it, and she led him to the bed he'd been giving her each night, the one that had belonged to him and Sarah in another lifetime. But this wasn't about ghosts or replacement or trying to reclaim what was lost. This was about two broken people choosing to be whole together, if only for one night. Kiona's hands moved to the laces of her dress, but they trembled slightly. Ethan covered them with his own. We don't have to. I want to, but I am afraid. Men have taken my body before, used it, hurt it. I want to give it freely this time, but I do not know how. Then we'll figure it out together. And if at any point you want to stop, we stop. You're in control here, Kiona, always. She searched his face, found only sincerity, and nodded. Her hands steadied, and she unlaced the dress, letting it fall to pool around her feet. She stood before him in the firelight, all muscle and scars and fierce beauty, vulnerable in a way she'd never been with anyone. Then we make the most of this time. We fight together, win together, or fall together. But we do not face it alone, never alone again. She settled back against him, her breathing gradually slowing into sleep. Ethan lay awake, listening to her heartbeat, feeling the weight of her trust like a sacred charge, and made a silent promise to whatever gods might be listening. Keep her safe. Let me be strong enough, fast enough, good enough to protect what we found. Just before he drifted off, he thought he heard distant hoofbeats, or maybe it was just his imagination. His soldier's instincts detecting threats that weren't yet visible. Either way, the peace of this moment couldn't last. War was coming, riding across the desert on horses made of hunger and hate. But tonight they had this, and for now it was enough. Dawn broke 2 days after Ayesha and Ethan first came together, and with it came the riders. The description Marcus had given matched perfectly. Tall in the saddle, lean as a whip, with a keloid scar running from temple to jawline that pulled his mouth into a permanent sneer. The two men flanking him were younger, harder, the kind of hired guns you found in every border town, men for whom violence was just another day's work. They stopped 30 feet from the cabin. Silas's eyes swept the property with professional assessment, cataloging the fortified positions, the sight lines, the defensive improvements Ethan had made. When his gaze landed on Ethan, his scarred mouth twisted into something approximating a smile. You'd be McCrae. Ethan didn't lower his rifle. And you'd be trespassing. Silas gestured to the land around them with lazy arrogance. Public territory, friend. Man's allowed to ride where he pleases. We're just passing through looking for lost property. Haven't seen any lost property. You're welcome to keep moving. See, that's where we have a disagreement. One of Silas's men shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his sidearm. We have reason to believe our property stopped here. Big Apache girl, strong as an ox, dangerous as a rattler. You seen anything like that? Ethan kept his voice flat. No. Silas's eyes hardened. That's a damn shame because I'd hate to think you were lying to me. Lying to a man in my position tends to end poorly for the liar. And threatening a man on his own property tends to end poorly for the one making threats. The air went taut as a bowstring. Silas's men tensed, hands hovering over weapons. Ethan's finger rested on his rifle's trigger, his breathing slow and controlled, the old army training kicking in. From his peripheral vision, he could see Keona's rifle barrel protruding slightly from the cabin doorway, trained on Silas's chest. Silas noticed it too. His eyes flicked toward the cabin, and something like satisfaction crossed his face. Well now, seems like maybe you have seen my property after all. Aya used her knowledge of Apache defenses to create improvised obstacles, sharpened stakes concealed in tall grass, tripwires strung across likely approach routes, a series of noisemakers using tin cans and pebbles that would alert them to movement in the dark. As afternoon bled toward evening, a rider appeared from the direction of town. Ethan's hand went to his rifle automatically before he recognized the horse and bearing. Marcus, riding hard, his face grim. The patrol captain dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, tying the reins with swift efficiency. Ethan met him halfway across the yard. You had visitors today. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. Elias Rourke and two others. Made threats, left when I made it clear they weren't welcome. Marcus pulled off his hat and wiped sweat from his forehead. I heard. Because Cordell was careful with money, kept minimal cash on premises, and the supposed robbery happened after hours when the business was locked tight. No signs of forced entry. Whoever killed him had a key or was let in by someone Cordell trusted. Silas had both. Marcus nodded toward Keona. Exactly. And when I started asking questions about Cordell's business associates, Kane's name came up again. They were partners in a trading operation that looked legitimate on paper but had some suspicious elements. Goods moving across territorial lines without proper documentation. Workers who seemed to appear and disappear without record. You think Cordell discovered Silas was trafficking and threatened to expose him? More than think. I know. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his jacket. This is a letter Cordell wrote to the territorial governor 2 days before his death. Never sent it because he died before he could. But it's not enough to convict him of Cordell's murder without corroborating testimony from someone who witnessed what happened. Keona's testimony. Marcus met her eyes directly. Yes, with both the letter and your account of what you saw, we could build a case that might actually hold up in court. It wouldn't be easy. You'd face cross-examination from lawyers who'd tear into your credibility, call you biased, claim you're the real murderer trying to shift blame. But with the letter as context and my investigation into his trafficking operations, we'd have a chance. Keona's jaw tightened. And if case fails, if jury believes Silas over Apache woman, then you hang for a murder you didn't commit. The brutal honesty hung in the air between them. Ethan reached under the table and took Keona's hand, feeling the tremor she was trying to suppress. There has to be another option. There is, Marcus said quietly. You run. Both of you. Take what you can carry, ride west into Arizona territory, or south into Mexico. Disappear. I'll tell anyone who asks that I came here, found the place deserted. No idea where you went. Ethan shook his head. We've discussed it. Running means looking over our shoulders forever. Eventually someone would recognize her, or Silas would get lucky with a tip. That's not living. That's just prolonging the inevitable. So what's your plan? We make our stand here. When Silas comes back, and he will, we defend this property. We survive. And then Ayesha testifies with me right beside her. You're talking about a pitched battle against professional gunmen on your own property. Marcus's voice rose with frustration. Ethan, you're one of the best shots I've ever seen, but you're still just one man. Even with her, he gestured at Keona, you're outnumbered and outgunned. She has brother, Ayesha interjected. Dakota. He is scout, tracker, warrior. He will fight with us. 3 against how many? Marcus demanded. Silas was already recruiting more men before he rode out here. I'd estimate he'll come back with at least 8, maybe 10. Those are bad odds even for soldiers with fortifications. Then what would you have us do? Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. Surrender? Watch them take her away to be killed or worse. I won't do that. I can't. Marcus stared at his friend for a long moment, then exhaled heavily. I know, if I were in your position, I'd do the same damn fool thing, which is why I'm going to help. You can't, Marcus. You'd be throwing away your career, maybe your freedom. Aiding a fugitive is exactly what I've been doing since I rode out here the first time. My career is already compromised the moment I chose not to arrest her on sight. Might as well see it through. Marcus, he held up a hand. Listen to me. I can't be here when Silas attacks. That would be too obvious, too easy to prove I was involved. But I can make sure I'm delayed responding to reports of trouble. I can fail to organize a posse quickly. I can give you time to resolve this situation before official intervention arrives. And after, I can testify that when I finally reached your property, I found evidence supporting Kiona's account of the Cordell murder. You would risk everything for us? Marcus looked at Ayesha when he answered. I've spent 10 years wearing this badge, thinking I was upholding justice. Then I watch men like Elias Rourke operate openly, trafficking people like livestock. And the law does nothing because his victims aren't considered fully human by the people who write the laws. If I can't help when the situation's this clear-cut, when the difference between justice and injustice is standing right in front of me, then what the hell am I wearing this badge for? Kiona's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Thank you. Your honor brings honor to all who know you. Just stay alive long enough for it to matter. Marcus left as the sun touched the western horizon, riding back toward town with promises to return as soon as he could plausibly claim to have heard about trouble. After his dust trail vanished, Ethan and Ayesha stood in the yard, the weight of what was coming settling over them like nightfall. How long you think we have? Ayesha asked. If Silas is smart, he'll spend a day or two recruiting more men, gathering supplies, making sure he's got overwhelming force. So 48 hours, maybe less. Then we have work to do. They labored through the night, taking shifts to rest while the other kept watch. Dakota appeared sometime after midnight, materializing from the darkness like a ghost. He brought an intelligence that chilled them all. I scout Silas's camp. He has 9 men now, maybe 10 by tomorrow. Good weapons, horses, supplies for siege if needed. They plan to surround ranch, burn you out if they must. That asking you and Marcus and Dakota to risk everything for me is selfish. Ethan stopped what he was doing and crossed to her, turning her to face him with gentle hands on her shoulders. You didn't ask for any of this. You survived horror, witnessed murder, and ran for your life. Everything that's happening now is because other people made choices. Silas chose to traffic in human beings, chose to commit murder, chose to hunt you rather than face justice. We're choosing to stand with you because it's right. That's not your burden to carry. But if you die, then I die protecting something worth protecting. That's more meaning than I've found in 2 years. She pulled him close, her arms wrapping around him with desperate strength. I love you, Ethan McCrae. I should have said it before. I love you, I know, and I love you. We're going to survive this, Kiona, all of us. She nodded against his chest, but he felt the doubt in the tension of her body, heard it in the way her breath caught like a soint she refused to release. They came at dawn on the 3rd day. Ethan woke to the sound of horses, multiple animals moving in formation, and was on his feet with rifle in hand before full consciousness arrived. Beside him, Ayesha was already moving to her position, checking her weapons with mechanical precision. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten, that deep blue moment before sunrise when the world held its breath. Through the firing port, Ethan counted riders appearing from multiple directions. 5 from the east, 3 from the south, 2 circling wide to approach from the west. 10 men total, exactly as Dakota had predicted. They were spreading out in a wide semicircle, staying just beyond effective rifle range, boxing the ranch in on 3 sides with the rocky ridge at their back forming the 4th wall. Ethan heard a man scream and saw one of the figures behind the wagon slump. For the next 20 minutes, the firefight was constant chaos. Muzzle flashes, smoke, the percussion of rifles and revolvers creating a thunderous symphony of violence. Ethan felt something tug at his shirt and realized a bullet had passed close enough to tear the fabric. Beside him, Ayasha grunted as splinters from the cabin wall flew into her arm, tiny wounds that bled but didn't slow her down. Then pain exploded across Ethan's shoulder, white-hot and shocking. He stumbled back from the firing port, his left arm suddenly weak and unresponsive. Blood spread across his shirt, not the arterial spray that meant death, but enough to know he had been hit. Ayasha was beside him instantly, her hands assessing the wound with practiced efficiency. Through, clean. You are lucky. Doesn't feel lucky. She tore a strip from her dress and bound the wound tight enough to make him gasp. You live, you are lucky. While the frontal assault had kept their attention focused on the eastern and southern approaches, three men had worked their way around to the stable. Even as he watched, they pushed open the door and disappeared inside. Storm was in there. They're going to kill my horse or burn the stable. Maybe both. He made a decision in half a heartbeat. Cover me. Before Ayasha could protest, Ethan was out the door, moving in a low run toward the stable. Bullets kicked up dust at his feet, thudded into the cabin wall behind him, sang past his ears with their lethal whisper. He made it to the stable entrance and pressed against the wall, breathing hard, pain lancing through his wounded shoulder with every movement. Inside, he heard voices and Storm's distressed whinny. He eased around the doorframe, rifle raised, and saw two men trying to maneuver the panicked horse toward the door, while a third poured oil along the stable walls. Ethan shot the one with the oil can first. The man dropped, and the can fell, spilling its contents in a spreading pool. The other two spun toward him, reaching for their guns. Ethan worked the rifle lever and fired again, catching one in the chest. The third man's shot went wild as Storm reared, his hooves catching the man's shoulder and sending him crashing into a stall partition. Ethan crossed quickly and knocked the man unconscious with his rifle butt, then led Storm out of the stable, one hand gripping the rope halter while the other kept his rifle marginally ready despite the agony in his shoulder. The return trip to the cabin felt like miles instead of yards. He could see Maya Shane in the doorway, rifle blazing, laying down covering fire that forced Silas's men to stay low. He was 10 feet from safety when something struck his leg, not a bullet, but the force of his own exhaustion and blood loss. He stumbled, nearly went down. Storm stopped beside him, and in a moment of clarity born from desperation, Ethan grabbed the horse's mane and let the animal's momentum carry him those last few feet. Kiona's strong hands pulled him inside, and Storm followed, his bulk barely fitting through the cabin doorway before Ayasha slammed and barred it behind them. You are insane, she said, but her hands were gentle as she laid him on the floor and examined his leg. The shoulder wound had reopened, and he'd acquired a graze along his calf that he hadn't even felt in the chaos. Had to save Storm. He saved you. Only fair. She pressed her forehead to his, that Apache gesture of deep connection. You are good man and complete fool. You've mentioned that before, Baroon. Outside, the shooting had intensified, as if Silas's men were frustrated by their failure to burn them out. But something had changed in the pattern of fire. Ethan, fighting through pain and haze, tried to identify what felt different. Then he realized. Dakota's rifle had gone silent. Ayasha heard it at the same moment. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. Brother, she moved to the firing port and scanned the rocks where Dakota had positioned himself. For a long moment, she was silent. Then, I see him. He moves. He is not shot. What's he doing? Signaling. She pointed, and Ethan followed her gesture to where a thin column of smoke rose from a precise point on the ridge. Not the smoke of a fire, but something controlled. 3 puffs. Pause. 2 puffs. Pause. 3 puffs. What does it mean? Kiona's voice was tight with tension. It mean help comes. Hold position. Help? From where, Beryl? She shook her head. I do not know, but Dakota would not signal unless he's certain. We must hold until... Her words were cut off by a new sound, a bugle call, clear and commanding, cutting through the gunfire like a knife through cloth. Ethan's heart leaped with recognition. That was a cavalry call, the charge command he'd heard 100 times during the war. From the western ridge, riders appeared, but these weren't more of Silas's hired guns. These wore the dust-colored uniforms of territorial patrol, and leading them was Marcus Webb, saber raised in a gesture that was pure theater, but effective nonetheless. Silas's men saw them coming and broke. Those still mounted tried to flee, but Marcus's patrol was already circling around, cutting off escape routes. Two men threw down their weapons and raised their hands immediately. Three others tried to run on foot and were tackled by patrolmen before they'd gotten 50 yards. Only Silas himself stood his ground, but it was the stance of a man who knew he was finished. When Marcus rode up to him, flanked by four armed riders, Silas's expression was one of cold calculation, already planning his defense, already crafting the lies he'd tell in court. Marcus dismounted and approached the cabin, his face grim despite the victory. Ethan pushed himself upright, gritting his teeth against the pain, and opened the door. "You're late. Had to make it look good. Rode as hard as I could once I heard the shooting." "Is she—" Marcus's question was answered when Ayesha appeared beside Ethan, blood-spattered and bruised but very much alive. The patrol captain's shoulders fogged with visible relief. "Thank God, when I saw how many men Silas had recruited, I thought—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. They all knew how close it had been. Dakota emerged from the rocks, moving down to join them, and Marcus's hand went to his gun reflexively before he registered that this was Kyona's brother. The Apache scout carried 3 rifles slung over his shoulders, weapons taken from downed attackers, and his face was set in hard lines. 4 dead. Marcus said quietly, reading the situation. 2 wounded badly. That would require months of legal battles, testimony, persuading juries and judges to see past prejudice to truth. But it was survival, and from survival, everything else became possible. As the sun climbed toward noon, Ethan watched Ayesha speaking quietly with her brother, saw the way Dakota's hand rested protectively on her shoulder, saw the fierce love that bound them despite years of separation and loss. Then Ayesha looked back at him, and her smile was like sunrise, painful in its brightness, but worth every shadow that preceded it. "We're going to be all right," he thought, and almost believed it. The 3 days following the battle passed in a haze of pain and bureaucracy. Ethan's shoulder wound required more attention than Kyona's field dressing could provide, so Marcus arranged for a doctor from Fort Stanton to ride out under patrol escort. The man, a grizzled army surgeon named Kellerman, who'd seen worse wounds at Gettysburg, cleaned and stitched with efficient brutality. "But I don't think it'll come to that. The evidence is strong and you're a compelling witness. Just tell the truth, exactly as it happened. Truth did not save my people from removal. Truth did not stop men from taking me as slave. Why you think truth will save me now?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable because it was rooted in decades of historical reality. Marcus couldn't promise that the system would work fairly because they all knew it often didn't. What he could promise was that he'd fight to make it work this time. The escort arrived at dawn the next day, 6 men under the command of a lieutenant named Briggs, young and eager with that mixture of idealism and inexperience that made Ethan uneasy. They brought a reinforced wagon with iron-barred windows, the kind used to transport dangerous prisoners. "She's not a criminal," Ethan protested when he saw it. "She's a witness under protection." Briggs's jaw tightened. They were crossing a stretch of badlands, all broken rock and narrow defiles, when Dakota suddenly urged his horse forward to ride alongside Marcus. Ethan watched the 2 men confer quietly, saw Marcus's hand drop to his rifle, saw Briggs's head snap around to scan their surroundings. "What is it?" Ethan called. Marcus turned in his saddle. "Your brother-in-law says we're being followed. 3 riders, maybe 4, staying just out of sight but tracking us since this morning. Could be anyone. Lots of people travel these roads." "Not like this," Dakota corrected. "They match our pace. When we stop, they stop. When we move, they move. They are hunting us, not traveling same direction." Briggs's face had gone pale. "You think it's Kane's people, coming to free him, or silence the witness?" Marcus's expression was grim. "Kane's still locked up in Lincoln under heavy guard. But he's got money and connections. Could have sent word before he was captured, arranged for backup in case things went wrong. They pushed harder after that, sacrificing rest for speed, trying to put distance between themselves and whatever threat followed. But the pursuit matched them, neither closing the gap nor falling back, just maintaining that same predatory patience. As the sun set on the 2nd day, Marcus made a decision. "We camp at Devil's Fork tonight. It's defensible. Canyon walls on 3 sides, only one way in. If they want to try something, we'll make them come to us on our terms. Devil's Fork was exactly as Marcus described, a box canyon with steep walls and a narrow entrance, the kind of terrain that turned ambush into suicide for the attackers. They set up camp quickly, posting double guards and positioning the wagon against the rear wall where it would be protected. Ayasha sat in the wagon, watching through the barred window as Ethan, Marcus, and Dakota planned defensive positions. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos as he rolled from his bedroll, already firing back toward the muzzle flashes. The escort scrambled to defensive positions, but in the confusion of darkness and sudden violence, 2 men went down in the first seconds. One with a leg wound, one with a bullet through his shoulder. Briggs was shouting orders, trying to organize a coherent defense, but the attackers had chosen their moment well. Gunfire erupted from the canyon entrance. Ethan and Nahale returned fire, pinning attackers behind cover. Then 3 men dropped from the canyon wall beside the wagon. "They're going for Kiona," Ethan tackled the first, driving Kiona's obsidian blade into his thigh. The second shot him, a crease across his ribs, and raised his gun for the kill. Then Kiona exploded from the wagon, door torn from broken lock. She hit the gunman like a boulder, slamming him into the canyon wall. Her knee strike folded him in half. She glanced down at herself, seemed surprised to find blood soaking through her dress. Though whether it was hers or from the men she'd fought, Ethan couldn't tell in the darkness. They moved toward each other, collapsing together in a tangle of exhausted relief. Marcus approached, checking both of them for serious injuries. That was too damn close. "They tried to take her," Ethan said, stating the obvious because his mind was still catching up to what his body had done on instinct. "Or kill her." Marcus's voice was flat. "Either way, she's too dangerous to whoever sent them. We need to move faster, get to Santa Fe before they can organize another attempt." Dawn revealed the cost. 2 of Briggs's men dead, 3 wounded, 5 attackers dead. "I've lost half my men," Briggs said, voice hollow. Marcus stepped forward. "I'll take command. We push hard, 48 hours to Santa Fe, leave the wounded here with guards, send for reinforcements." Briggs nodded. "On your authority, Captain. And you claim to have witnessed Mr. Kane commit murder. But isn't it true that you had reason to bear false witness? That Mr. Kane had previously been your owner, and you resented him? I do not need to lie. Truth is terrible enough." Pemberton's smile was patronizing. "But how can we trust your version of events? You're an Apache woman with every reason to lie to save yourself from prosecution. For all we know, you killed Mr. Cordell yourself and are attempting to shift blame." Kiona's eyes flashed with anger, but her voice remained controlled. "If I kill Cordell, why I stay to be seen? Why I not run immediately? Why I wait for Silas to find me, to threaten me? Perhaps because you didn't expect to be caught. Perhaps—" "Captain Webb," Thornton interrupted, "you have evidence to present?" Marcus stood approaching the bench with Cordell's letter. "Your Honor, members of the jury, this letter was written by James Cordell 2 days before his death. He laid out documents, testimonies, bills of sale with Kane's signature, transport records showing movements that matched trafficking routes." The evidence piled up, each piece another nail in Silas's coffin. When Marcus finished, even Pemberton seemed diminished. He made a few more half-hearted attempts to discredit Kiona's testimony, but the cumulative weight of evidence was overwhelming. The grand jury retired to deliberate, and Thornton called a recess. Ethan found Shane the holding room adjacent to the courtroom, sitting alone with her hands folded in her lap. When she saw him, something in her composed expression cracked slightly. "I spoke truth, all of it, but still I feel like I am one being judged, not Silas. You're not being judged, you're being heard, and everyone in that room saw exactly what you are, a survivor telling the truth despite everything arrayed against you. Kane for human trafficking across territorial lines, and that Miss Ayasha Bey granted immunity from any prosecution related to her status as an enslaved person during the commission of crimes she may have witnessed or been coerced into assisting. Furthermore, she is to be released from custody immediately, all charges of murder dismissed with prejudice." The gavel came down with finality. Kiona's knees buckled slightly, and Ethan caught her, holding her upright as the full weight of what had just happened sank in. She was free, not just physically, but legally, officially. The system that had been designed to crush her had instead validated her truth. Silas was being led away in chains when he turned back, his scarred face twisted with venom. You think you've won? This trial will take months. I've got money, connections. I'll walk free while you spend the rest of your miserable life looking over your shoulder. Behind them, they could hear Silas still shouting threats and curses. Ahead of them stretched an uncertain future, one requiring rebuilding and healing and learning to live without looking constantly over their shoulders. But they were free, and they were together. And for now, that was everything. The days following the grand jury decision unfolded in a blur of legal proceedings and bureaucratic machinery grinding toward justice. Ethan, Kiona, and Dakota remained in Santa Fe, housed in a boarding establishment that Marcus arranged at territorial expense. The rooms were simple but clean, and for the first time in months, Ayasha could sleep without bars between her and the sky. She woke on the third morning to find Ethan sitting by the window, his shoulder still bandaged but healing, watching the sunrise paint the adobe buildings in shades of rose and gold. Without speaking, she moved to sit beside him, and he wrapped his good arm around her shoulders. We're building a future together, not fighting over fence lines. After the meeting, they walked through Santa Fe's winding streets, Ayasha silent and processing. Dakota had disappeared as he often did, scouting the city, or perhaps simply giving his sister space to absorb the magnitude of what had just happened. 40 acres, Ayasha Finley said. I own 40 acres of earth, me Apache woman who 3 months ago was property, and $3,000. Don't forget that part. Money is temporary. Land is forever. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Ethan, you understand what this means? I am not dependent. I do not need you for survival, for protection from law. I choose you freely, not because I must. I've always known you chose me freely, but I'm glad you'll have this independence. You deserve it. Her eyes searched his face. You are not angry? Some men would be angry that woman they love does not need them. I don't want you to need me. I want you to want me. There's a difference. She kissed him then, in the middle of the street, uncaring of the stares from passers-by who saw an Apache woman embracing a white man with scandalous public affection. When they broke apart, both were smiling. 2 weeks later, all the legal documents were finalized. Elias Rourke's trial was scheduled for 3 months hence, though few doubted the outcome given the weight of evidence. Marcus received official commendation for his investigation, along with a promotion that gave him authority over the entire Southeastern Territorial District. And Ayasha held in her hands a deed, signed and sealed, that declared her owner of 40 acres of New Mexico territory. They rode back to the ranch together, a small caravan of 4, Ethan and Kiona, Dakota and Marcus, who'd taken leave to help them settle in. Storm carried Ethan with his usual patient determination, while Ayasha rode a sturdy bay mare that Marcus had purchased with some of her restitution money. Ethan spent those weeks repairing the cabin's interior, sanding rough edges from the new classroom floor, building shelves for books they hoped to acquire. Marcus arrived with a wagon load of supplies: flour, salt, coffee, sugar. His contribution to the feast. The patrol captain seemed lighter somehow, years of tension finally easing from his shoulders. You did it, he said to Ethan one evening. Saved her. Saved yourself, maybe. We saved each other, Ethan corrected. That's how this works. On the morning of the wedding, Kiona woke before dawn and walked alone to the ridge where she'd first met Nahaley. She carried a small bundle, her mother's necklace, saved from the village burning, hidden all these years. She buried it at the base of a pinyon tree, whispering prayers in Apache for blessings, for her parents' spirits to witness this joy, for strength in the new life beginning. When she returned, Ethan was waiting at the cabin door, already dressed in his cleanest clothes, the silver ring she'd made him catching morning light. Ready? He asked. She took his hand. I have been ready since the moment you chose to stand between me and those who would break me. Then let's make it official. He took the ring, sliding it onto his finger where it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her close, and they sat tangled together as the desert sky turned purple and the first stars appeared. They were married on the 1st of October, in a ceremony that blended traditions from both their worlds. Marcus served as witness, along with Dakota and 3 Apache women who'd heard about Kiona's freedom and ridden 2 days to attend. A Catholic priest from Santa Fe performed the legal ceremony, while Dakota conducted a traditional Apache blessing that involved smoke, corn pollen, and prayers in a language Ethan didn't understand but felt in his bones. When it was done and they were legally bound, Ayasha turned to the small gathering and spoke in English, so everyone would understand. I stand here as Ayasha McCrae, wife to Ethan, owner of land, free woman under law. But I do not forget I also stand here as survivor, as witness to others who suffer still, as Apache woman who carries responsibility to her people. She looked at Ethan, then continued, "My husband and I, we build more than home. We build school where Apache children learn to read, write, speak English, but also learn traditional ways, learn pride and heritage, learn they are not lesser because they are indigenous. We need teachers, need supplies, need families willing to send children. If you know anyone who can help, we welcome them." One of the Apache women stepped forward. "I am called Desba. I have 3 children, no husband. White school in Santa Fe will not take them because they are Apache. If you truly build place of learning, I bring my children and I work for you. Cooking, cleaning, whatever you need." Ayasha clasped the woman's hands. "You do not work for us. You work with us. This is community we are building, not hierarchy." By winter, 5 Apache families had settled on or near the combined ranch property. Some built their own small dwellings on the edges of Kiona's 40 acres, which she allowed freely. Others worked as paid labor in exchange for housing in a bunkhouse Dakota designed and built. The school took shape slowly, first just Desba's 3 children and 2 others, learning their letters while sitting on log benches in the expanded cabin. Ayasha proved to be a natural teacher, patient but firm, and her own experience learning English as a second language helped her understand the children's struggles. Ethan taught reading and basic arithmetic. Dakota taught tracking and survival skills. Desba taught traditional Apache crafts and stories. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and challenges. The winter of 78 into 79 was brutal, with snow that isolated them for weeks. 2 of the families left in spring, finding the isolation and hard work too demanding. A delegation from Santa Fe arrived to inspect the school, suspicious that it might be a cover for Apache resistance organizing, and had to be convinced through careful diplomacy that it was exactly what it claimed to be. But slowly, steadily, the dream solidified into reality. 14 months after Kiona's testimony freed her, on a December morning in 1879, she woke to nausea so intense she barely made it outside before vomiting. Ethan found her kneeling in the snow, shaking. "Food poisoning. We should get the doctor." She looked up at him, and despite the pallor of her face, she was smiling. "Not food poisoning, baby." The word hung in the frozen air between them. "Baby, you're sure? My moon time is late, 2 months late, and I feel different. I know my body. There is child growing inside me." Ethan sank to his knees beside her, heedless of the snow soaking through his pants. His hand moved to her stomach, still flat and showing no sign of the life within. "We're going to have a baby." "Yes, unless you regret putting your seed in Apache woman." He pulled her close, careful of her nausea. "The only thing I regret is every moment of my life before you arrived. Everything since then has been the best gift I could never have imagined." She cried then, the tears coming hot and fast, and he understood they were tears of release. For the years of suffering that had led here, for the impossible journey from slave to wife to mother, for the sheer overwhelming magnitude of being free and loved and about to bring new life into a world that had tried so hard to extinguish hers. The baby was due in summer. As Kiona's belly swelled with life, the school swelled with students. By spring of 1880, 12 children attended regularly, ranging from age 5 to 14. They learned English and arithmetic and basic science. They learned Apache language and traditions and survival skills. They learned that being indigenous wasn't something to hide or be ashamed of, but a heritage to carry with pride. On a June evening, with Ayasha 8 months pregnant and moving with the careful deliberation of someone carrying precious cargo, the community gathered for what had become a weekly tradition. Shared meal and stories under the stars. 23 people in total, Apache families, Ethan and Kiona, Dakota, who'd become permanent fixture, Marcus, who visited when patrol duties allowed, and even Douglas from the general store who'd developed unexpected friendship with Desba. The children performed a play they'd written themselves, mixing Apache stories with Shakespeare they had been reading. And they will know the story of how mother survived, how father chose love over safety, how uncle returned from death to protect his sister. This child will carry the story of our strength. Ayasha looked at both men, her husband and her brother, and felt something settle deep in her soul. For so many years, survival had been the only goal. Now she understood that survival was just the beginning. What came after, the building, the teaching, the loving, the creating, that was what gave survival meaning. The baby came in July, a daughter with her mother's dark eyes and her father's lighter skin, a visible representation of two worlds merging. They named her Sarah Ayita McCrae. Sarah for Ethan's first wife, honoring the past, Ayita for Kiona's mother, honoring heritage, and McCrae binding them all together. When Ayasha held her daughter for the first time, with Ethan beside her and Dakota standing guard at the door, she whispered in Apache, then translated for Ethan's benefit. "Little one, you are born into a world that will try to tell you that you are too much Apache to be accepted, too much white to belong. But here on this red earth, you are exactly enough. You are loved. You are free. You are ours." 5 years later, the school had expanded to house 32 students, with 2 additional teachers hired from back east. A young woman named Claire who taught music and art, and a former Army chaplain named Reverend Michaels who taught history and literature. The territorial government, after much pressure from Marcus and other advocates, officially recognized the school and provided small funding. Ayasha and Ethan had 2 more children, a son named Dakota for Kiona's father, and another daughter they named Hope because after everything they had endured, Hope felt like the most appropriate legacy. Elias Rourke had been convicted and sentenced to hang, and it would hold those memories long after they were all dust, a testament to the truth that some kinds of bondage can be broken, some wounds can heal, and some loves are strong enough to transform not just 2 lives, but the very ground they stand on. As darkness claimed the desert, the lights from their home, for it was their home now, built by their hands and filled with their love, glued warm against the night, a beacon declaring that here, on this particular patch of New Mexico territory, justice had been served, freedom had been won, and family had been forged from the unlikeliest elements. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.